Hi, friends. Welcome to the MB.P Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing mobile bar and event professionals with the information they need to succeed. I'm your host, business coach, and founder of the Mobile Bar Academy, Sarah Murphy. In each episode, the MB.P Pros team will bring you industry experts, information, anecdotes, and opinions with the goal of assisting you in building a profitable, sustainable, and successful business that supports you in creating wealth. I'm excited to share with you today's episode, so let's get started.
Welcome back to the podcast, guys. We are actually going to be posting this podcast in two different places. So if you're listening to this through MB.P, welcome. And if you're listening to this through Crowns and Chaos, welcome. If you would like to subscribe to the Crowns and Chaos podcast for more of what we're going to be talking about and referencing today, I'll leave that link below for the Mobile Bev Pros crew. Today, we're going to be talking about radical plotting. Now, this is one pillar out of a set of pillars that we have established for our inner villain challenge over on Crowns and Chaos. And radical plotting is so very important to business owners in general. And so that's why we decided we were going to be posting it in two different places, because we think it will benefit all of our audience, not just the segments. And so we're going to be chatting radical plotting. And it couldn't be more timely because we're at the end of 2024. People are going to be looking ahead to 2025. We're going to be running Brew early January for the brave souls who want to come sun, sand, and plan with us. And we're going to be planning their year with them. And so we do a lot in Q4 and then early Q1 to establish strategies that create success. So you guys are going to get to hear a little bit more of the nuances and the energetics behind the planning and strategy processes, some of the things that keep people from implementing plans. This episode isn't going to be, here's how to create a plan. We have tons of that. We have replays in the academy. Like, you can come join us in Puerto Rico. Actually, you can't, doors are closed, but you should have got in there. There are a million ways that you can go and create a strategy, even with us. But this episode is going to be more focused on the hurdles people face once they have a strategy before them. Why do they have such a hard time implementing it? Or even, why do they have such a hard time creating the strategy to begin with? And Sarah, this is your zone of genius. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, admittedly, I was born into this world with a Virgo sun. And so I just inherently and naturally have been attracted to the science of organization and the science of bringing order to chaos. I also was born with a Scorpio Mars, with my Mars in Scorpio, which means I also love to burn things down and create chaos. So the war is real. But as a business coach, it was not lost on me almost immediately that people were razzle dazzled by my ability to bring order to chaos and to make really complex concepts easy to understand. And that extended into strategic planning, which for me comes naturally inherently. I see an end goal and my brain just automatically starts parsing it into, these are the steps to get there. These are the resources we need, the time requirements, the connections, and the people that will need to be leaned upon or sourced. And so I just inherently assumed, I think when I first started the business coaching endeavor, that like that was not something people needed assistance with. Because it's just very clear. But that's not what I found, actually. People love learning about strategy. We did a quarterly strategy planning webinar. We had over 100 people sign up for that. And that to me tells me that there's a knowledge gap, which still confounds me because there's so much industry out there around how to plan and how to set goals and break those goals down into tangible action items. And so when we started doing the work of confining and defining what the villain code was, it was important to us that we provided all of the known requirements around how to accomplish things in life. If you want to do big work, which the Villain Era Challenge is all about people who want to do big work, either on themselves or the world at large. If you want to do big work in the world, you have to learn how to hold immense amounts of power. And in order to hold immense amounts of power, you need foundational strengths. And one of those things is building a plan. If you want to do a thing, you got to have a plan for doing that thing. And so radical plotting was naturally just a part of the villain's code. What we find though, is that when people say they want a thing, their brain just for whatever reason starts to glitch when we ask them, okay, well, how are you going to accomplish that thing? And so again, there's no secret out there as to how to create a strategy. There's like probably blog posts and there's like YouTube videos, and like we have a ton of content out there that will walk you through the exact process of how to do that. And yet there is resistance, and you also have resistance here. You earlier, we were talking about that. You're like, it's not that I can't create a plan and I don't like to plan. And then you were immediately like, well, actually, like your brain literally glitched in that moment and your face just went boop, like you couldn't even in truth say that. You couldn't even with your full heart claim to like planning. To a certain extent, we have to address that within the villain code. At this point, you might be feeling resistance. And that obviously is not lost on us. We spent the last year or two digging into like, what are all the reasons why people say they want a thing and then don't do any of the things that get them from here to there. Or if they say, okay, this will get me from here to there, they don't do that thing. So it's not even just they don't know what to do, but they know what to do and they don't do it. Like that's part of radical planning, is like bringing awareness to, if you want to create anything in the world, if you want to accomplish anything in the world, the first thing you need to do is decide what it is that you want to do. The next thing you need to decide is how to get from A to B.
Yeah, and there's something here around the fluidity and being flexible in your planning. And so for me, the resistance around long-term planning is that like I am an artist at soul, and I'm so fluid and I change with the weather, you know. And so what I want next week might not be what I want today. And what I want in 2 months might not be what I want right now. And so for me, that's where I get stuck. But you actually build in the way you teach planning, really builds in the importance of flexibility and being aligned with your goals and your authentic desires before you move forward with the planning process. Because it's easy to just take a business plan and slap it onto a Google Doc and now we've got a strategy without really taking into account like, who am I? How do I work best? What level of flexibility is important for me? What level of rigidity is important for me? Because just like your bones, when you have a strategy, you don't want your bones to be so strong that they're brittle and they break easily, but you also don't want them to be malleable because then you're a puddle of pudding, right? We want you to have strong bones, not rigid bones, so that we can uphold the structure of the body. And that's what a strategy does. A plan gives you a structure. And you think about anything in life that you're building. You're going to build a house. Would you say, just build the foundation out of wet mud? You know, no, like you need it to hold up your house so that your family is safe and that you're confident in your stable foundation. And that's what having a strategy does. But we also need it to be flexible.
I saw a meme the other day that was basically like, me as a 16-year-old, don't tell me what to do. Me as a 32-year-old, please, for the love of God, will someone just tell me what to do? Right. And I feel like we've overcorrected, and society probably has created a lot of self-doubt in people. And life has inherently taught us that, oh, I actually don't know as much as I think I do. And so when it comes to planning, I think people second guess themselves a lot. And so they're like, I don't know how to get from A to B because I don't know what I don't know. And that awareness is really helpful. If you're planning properly, their plan will design more questions than answers. And that's part of the process. And I think what happens is people start planning and then they realize there are so many holes where they don't know. And then they get disenfranchised, or they get really overwhelmed because they're like, wow, I thought I was just trying to accomplish a simple thing, and I'm left with 80 questions. And we've seen this before when I've walked people through creating a strategy, very simple formula, and we could automate quite a lot of it. At the end of it, they end up with like 80 to-do items. And they're like, fuck this, can't, overwhelmed, can't even look at that. That's too much. Right. And it's like, that to me is clarity. Clarity lights me all the way up. I'm like, oh my God, I have a path. Whereas some see that and they're like, all of this obligation on my time. And if that is the sense that you get after you look at that, there are a few things that we then want to look at. Do you really want it? Because all things worth doing are probably hard. because otherwise you'd already have it. Right? And if the answer is like actually no, okay, then now we have clarity around what it would take. And you've decided that's not something that you want to do. And so we don't have to do it. Right. The other thing that we can look at is like maybe you need to extend out the time frame in which that needs to be done. Great example for this is, and you mentioned houses, so I'm going to just ride that horse. Anytime you've ever talked to someone who had a house built, they'll tell you it took like twice as long as it was supposed to. And that's with contractors who do this for a living. It's like the weatherman, where it's like you don't even have to be right 50% of the time and you can still be good at your job. Contractors always give timeframes and they never meet those timeframes. And so like potentially it's going to take you longer to accomplish the thing than you think. And that's because when planning to accomplish a new thing, inherently, because it's new, it's going to be rife and riddled with unknowns. When we practice radical plotting, it's really important that we leave space for the unknowns. Now, listen, sometimes you accomplish things in half the time or a quarter of the time than you thought because you just didn't know. But sometimes it's going to take you 3 times as long to accomplish the thing. The point is figure out where it is you want to go and start chipping away at that, knowing that you're going to not know 7,000 times more than you do know getting from here to there. We say oftentimes, like, let's kick it around the Enneagram. Okay. And like that whole thing is a deeper thing. But like the first time you do a thing is the first time around the Enneagram. And you're going to learn things and you're going to fail at things and all the things happen the first time around the Enneagram. Then you're going to kick it around the Enneagram again, and you're still going to learn things. And like that process, that you can also talk about Kaizen, right? There's a lot of ways to look at this. But if you are overwhelmed by planning because it feels like obligation, then we need to look at your relationship with obligation, because you are obligated only to you. So if you are at war within yourself around really wanting a thing, then we don't have alignment. We have the opposite of that.
I teach a core magic that includes a subsect called resistance magic. And resistance is exactly what you're talking about here. It's anything that you say you want, and then what's required creates resistance in you. Or sometimes it's things you say you don't want, and on a subconscious level, you absolutely do want them. There's several ways that you can be in resistance to a thing. But essentially, here, when you say you want a 6-figure mobile bar, and Sarah gives you a strategy with 80 to-do items, and you are immediately in resistance. One, either you don't actually want the mobile bar as bad as you thought you did. You loved the idea. I teach that in relationships. You love the idea of him, right? But not who he truly is. When you see a strategy laid out before you, now you're faced with who he truly is, right? This is who the business truly is. It requires these 80 tasks and ongoing da-da-da. And we've painted that gold when in fact it's going to require a lot of nitty-gritty. So you can look at like maybe you don't actually want it the way that you thought you did because you're not willing to do the work. Or maybe you do want it, but to your point, you have a resistance to obligation. And resistance is a powerful magic. The reason I teach it as a powerful magic is because when you lean in, when something feels like I should go all the way out and you lean all the way in, oh my God, magical things occur. You have breakthroughs, up levels, evolutions that you could not even fathom because the medicine is on the other side of resistance. And so sometimes you get to look at embracing the challenge of 80 items on your to-do list rather than running away from it. But you do have to decide, is the sacrifice worth it? I said I wanted a 6-figure mobile bar. I recognize now that it's going to require a little more than a tablecloth covering a 8-foot table. Do I really want this? And if you do, and you lean in and you embrace those challenges, this time next year, you're an even stronger business owner because you were challenged. And so we want to embrace the resistance and embrace the challenges for the things that we really do want, with the recognition that it does require sacrifice. That sacrifice is going to be your time. If you have 80 demands on your time, okay, time is the sacrifice. It might be money. It might be emotional capacity. It might be time with your friends and family on the weekends at first. You have to decide, are these things worth sacrificing? And then I'll help you discern, is the strategy worth executing?
One of the biggest realizations that we oftentimes get is that people say they want a successful business. And, you and I were forged through the fires of the mobile bar industry. And so we see this very often and very frequently with mobile bar owners. They want a successful mobile bar. Great. We literally have the roadmap for that. We have the roadmap, the resources. We can tell you exactly how to do it step by step by step. And yet, and yet, right? And so you and I, we love to look at the and yet. Recently in the group program, there was this reflection that maybe what you want isn't a successful mobile bar. Maybe what you want is money, or maybe what you want is financial freedom, or maybe what you want is to work for yourself because that last boss that you had was a total dick and you felt powerless. And so you want to be your own boss. Or maybe what you want is to make an impact on the world. We sometimes get people in that are like, I want to give this to my kids. And so they can start their professional careers with a successful business. And so I want to build it up and like pass it on. Or we have a client who a part of the proceeds go towards a nonprofit that she owns that helps orphans in Ethiopia. And she adopted her son from Ethiopia. And so like that's close to her heart. And so again, we're bringing this all back to the big why, but oftentimes we get very surface level desires that are, I want to do this. Great. Here's the plan. And then we get all the friction, we get all the resistance, we get all the stories, we get all the, right? And oftentimes we don't get it until we start holding feet to the fire with the plan. Okay, if you want that, this is how we do it. Okay, this is what you're trying to achieve. It requires these things of you. And we have been conditioned to believe, I think, to our own detriment, that the process of transformation can be comfortable. A few examples here. Magic pills. Anytime I see anything that's like, all you are missing is this one fucking enzyme, vitamin, nutrient, take magnesium, it'll change your life. Take this methylated whatever the fuck, and you'll feel like a new person, right? Magic pills don't exist. But we want them to so badly that, again, it's $1 billion industry. There's a new service that some of my relatives tried recently that is like an exercise thing. That it's 20 minutes. You go in, they put you in a suit, and it works out your body for you. It's very expensive to do this, but it will work your body. And basically, they tell you that it's like 20 minutes, and it's like working your body out for an hour. I don't fucking believe it. I'm sorry, I can't. I refuse, because I don't think that you can, like, first of all, every hospital that has anyone in a comatose state is probably would be utilizing this, right? Because like you don't want muscular degeneration for someone you're trying to keep alive, right? So like, I don't think that's happening. Second of all, you gotta earn it. If you want any results in life, you have to earn them. You have to forge it through the fires of execution. And so if you want that tight fit body, move it, strengthen it, stretch it. And I don't think that there's technology that can do that. Society is always looking for efficiency. The body, the brain, humanity is always seeking efficiency. Your conscious brain is trying to pass every damn thing off to your subconscious programming so it can just run it on repeat. Okay. And so like, we know this to be true. But if you do something that is repeatable, routine, then you get what you've always gotten. The routine is going to give you the same results every time. And if you are trying to achieve a new thing, you need new results. Those are different results. That requires planning and willpower. It requires acting in a way that you haven't acted before, doing a thing that you haven't done before to get different results. And so that process isn't comfortable. New things are not comfortable, and your brain tells you that they aren't even safe. And so you have to enter into any radical plotting with an intentionality and a recognition that you will get resistance. There will be hills that need to be tackled. There will be challenges. There will be unknowns. And you have to basically hold up your dragon slayer warrior sword and go to task. Like, this is not going to be easy. We are going to have to overcome a lot of things, including yourself.
Yeah, the magic pill thing really lands because so many people, whether it's that they just want to take a shot to lose weight, or they get sucked into an MLM that says all of our people are millionaires, just buy this mascara. Or when I first started in the online industry in 2018, everybody was a coach and all the coaches were like, I can show you how to make 10 grand a month. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. What's the investment? And they're like, oh, you got to pay me 10 grand a month. I'm like, okay, that seems like I already have your formula there. And so we want to recognize that like willpower is a muscle that has to be built. And it's only built through strength training, right? It's only like you have to your point, you got a dragon slayer, go to task. And so willpower is built through the changing of current habits over and over again. And every time it's uncomfortable. Again, we're leaning into resistance magic, we're leaning into challenges, we're leaning into discomfort. This is what sets the most successful people apart. It's just that they have gotten really comfortable with being really uncomfortable, right? And so you want to continue to build the willpower muscle by engaging in things that cause you to use willpower. And so we're going to be disrupting habits. The caveat to disrupting habits, and this is why I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions, first of all, because it's not actually the technical New Year that happens in the spring, it's astrological, but whatever. When we talk about changing habits and we go New Year's resolutions, everybody's New Year's resolution is like, I'm going to be a totally different person. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden I'm going to have the energy to go to the gym every single day, only drink protein smoothies and eat carrots and never, ever even sniff sugar. And then what happens on January 2nd? On their way to the gym, they walk past the fucking bakery. Do you know what I'm saying? And so, like, you have to recognize that when you're building new habits, they have to be sustainable. You can't just wake up tomorrow and have a totally different business and be a totally different person. You have to work with who you are and change it in small and sustainable ways over the course of time so that we're exercising the willpower muscle, but that we're not expecting ourselves to just wake up and be different tomorrow. That's unsustainable. And that strategy, you'll fail. And so, to your point earlier, you said potentially it's going to take you longer than you thought it would. That's what I'm saying here. We don't want to set a strategy in place and be like, I'm going to get to six figures in 3 months by being an entirely different person tomorrow morning. Chances are, if you were already burnt out on your business yesterday, you're going to still be burnt out on your business tomorrow. Right. And so we want to create small, sustainable changes so that over time you're exercising willpower, you're building stamina and your capacity for the uncomfortable, and give yourself a little more time. Give yourself a little more grace. Be flexible, forgiving, and fluid in your strategy and structure.
Right. So, like, if I give you a plan that's 80 steps long and that looks super overwhelming, and this is what happens. I'm going to call out Jamie here because I think she'd be fine with it. When I first gave her her business plan to create her mobile bar success, and listen, her mobile bar has been very successful this year. And so she's working the plan. But again, it was like 80 things, and every single one has like a lesson attached to it and like all sorts of things, right? Like, you can't just check it off. You got to go and do the thing. She assigned herself to complete all of them within 3 months. Now she's in a 1 year container. So, like, why? Like, what would be the point of that? I mean, I could always give you more to do, but I told her, she was like, I think I can get it all done in 3 months. And I was like, oh, like, oh, that's okay. We'll see. She didn't. She didn't. As she went through it, there was probably resistance. I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do that. I have a lot of questions around that. And like, whatever, I'm not judging, but that could be a 2 year. There's no rush on achieving those things. It's just that if this is what you want, these are the steps that are going to be required. And so, like, maybe you do one this week, maybe you do none this week, and you do one next week, and then none for another 2 weeks, and then one the following week. It doesn't ultimately matter. Even if you're like, well, it does matter because I need it to make money because like it needs to pay me. Ultimately, that doesn't matter either because you can just go make money another way. Like, we oftentimes will pressure ourselves so much, and then we'll look at all the things that we haven't done. And then we'll say, I'm worthless. I can't do this. This is impossible. So I'm just not going to. And that is not at all what we want. If you make a resolution at any point in the given year that you want to lose weight, and you join the gym and you go that first day, and then you don't go for 4 days, and then you go again, and then you don't go for 7 days, and then you go again, and then you go the next day, cool. Right? Like, we're making steps in the right direction just by showing up and going. And that's why when we track, I have like a daily ritual sheet, it asks, what pattern are you building? There's this concept of like streaks, like how many days in a row have you done it? I don't care how many days in a row that you've done it. How many days have you done it since you started? And like, first it might be every day and then you fall off, right? Like, we're just looking to like, are we going in the right direction? And if at the end of year one, you only did it 50 times out of 365 times, but then the following year, you've done it 70 times out of 365, that is progress in the right direction. There's no room for perfection in life. It's just not even possible. And so progress is what we're looking for. And you might get into the process of like trying to achieve that thing or build that pattern or change that thing, accomplish that thing, and realize actually you don't give a fuck about that thing. and okay, this is radical self-acceptance and radical ownership. We get to choose how we show up. And so when we're creating a plan, we know we are going to have to rely on willpower. What we know about willpower is that it's finite. It is a muscle that can be strengthened, but it is finite. And so it's going to be easier to do a thing in the morning than it is at night because we're running on empty at night. But we also know that we can build into plans this concept called forcing functions. So in all things, we work with psychology in the brain, okay? And there's a little cheat codes within the brain that we can utilize, we can lean on to achieve things more efficiently, more painlessly. There's a few, there's 5 of them. And I got these from a book called Willpower Doesn't Work. I don't recommend you reading the book because I feel like it's very problematic in a lot of ways, but there's some good information in it. And one of them is listing out of these forcing functions. One way that you can build into whatever radical plot that you're creating is high investment. So if you are invested heavily in something, you're more likely to accomplish that thing. So one example here is people who invest in our group accountability program, they're asked to kind of pony up some money. It's not a lot. I don't think so. It's a few $100 a month and they get a lot of value from it. But if it's not high enough to make them slightly uncomfortable, we have noticed they just won't show up. They just won't show up because there's no investment in it. If it's slightly uncomfortable for them to show up, they're going to show up. And part of it's because they feel like they need to get value out of it. Okay. You know, like we have one-on-one containers that are 4 figures a month and they will make damn sure they get their calls scheduled and that they will show up, right? Like, cool. I want that for you. High investment for whatever reason. And whether that's a high energetic, you know, an example that if you become a doctor after 8 years of college and a 5-year residency, you're probably not going to then decide to become an attorney. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you won't. I'm just saying like you're so invested in medicine at that point that you are likely going to achieve your goals. If you're 3 years into your residency and you have 2 more to go, you're likely going to finish the last 2 because it's high investment. The other is social pressure. And so we see this and like if you tell someone you're going to do a thing, you're more likely to do that thing. And so group accountability programs, if you are in a community, book clubs are a great example. Maybe you don't do a good job of reading books, but then you join a book club because you're like, now I've told everybody I'm going to read this book and I got to go to the meeting to talk about the book. So like I should read the book. That's social pressure. We can build that in to our plans. When we are creating a plan to accomplish something, you can tap an accountability buddy. I was in a group program 2 years ago where that was part of the requirement. You had to reach out to the other people in the community and find someone who would be your accountability partner. And there was a minimum requirement of like aligning once a week. You had to either text each other or call each other, like you got to choose, but like that was part of it. And it's effective. We know that to be true. So lean into it. The other one that we have here is high consequence for poor performance. I talked about this at one point, but I was like, what if we removed some much loved perks and benefits, or we only offered perks and benefits to people who accomplished the things that they wanted, right? Like that's high consequence for poor performance. We see this in schools, right? That's where grades come in. My 8-year-old has this thing where if you finish all your homework by Friday, you get to play this game called Trash Get Ball. I'm not sure what it is, but she loves it. My daughter hates homework, but she will do it in order to play this game, right? So like we see this already inherently in a lot of ways, right? Like this is built in a lot of places, but you can also build it into your own plan as you go to build in a high consequence for poor performance. Sometimes this is natural. Nature loves this one. Like nature loves to be like, if you slip while climbing this mountain, like just don't. It's gonna hurt. So don't, right? But you can build that in. And the last two here are pretty simple. One is high difficulty. High difficulty is a psychological thing that like our brains love to do hard things. That's why, especially like in video games, like there's the boss and like you're going to fail at beating the boss the first couple of times, but you're going to try again because like you love that. You're like, I gotta do it. Right. And so your brains love things that are difficult, but not impossible. If we think at any point that it is impossible, we will just stop. We'll stop trying. But if we think it's possible, but hard, this is actually one of the biggest triggers for flow state. You're doing a thing and then you look up and you're like, shit, it's been 3 hours. How did all that time go by? Because when it's high difficulty, our brain has to use all of its pieces and parts. These are the moments where you can't even listen to music and do what you're doing. You're like, every noise is like, stop. I need all brain power in order to do this thing. And we love it. We love it. Our brains are like all the way lit up by it. And then this last one is a novelty. Like we like to do fun things. That's like, so when you're building your plan, build in novelty to it. And that could be something as much as like, I'm going to work from this gorgeous library one day. If you do that, it's fun, a new place to work, you're more likely to get things done. And we've seen this in our group programs where people are like, I work from a coffee shop because I get more done there. Like there's no reason for that to work other than the fact that your brain likes the fact that you're working in a new place. And there's probably less distractions from like your pets and your laundry, but novelty will help. So if you're ever creating a plan and there's a piece that feels extra hard or like you absolutely don't want to do it, like maybe novelty will help pull that across the finish line for you.
The other thing that we see around people having unrealistic expectations is that feeds into procrastination. For example, Jamie, who was like, I'm going to get all this done in 3 months, that overwhelms the system, right? And then we would just rather do nothing. And so if I commit to every day working out in 2025, that's an unrealistic expectation if I have no history working out whatsoever, right? And so then I'm going to procrastinate and I'm going to label myself a failure. I'm going to use that as proof for my inability to change a habit, right? Because I said 365. That's an unrealistic expectation and it leads to the labeling of failure and it leads to procrastination. The other thing here that I really want to make sure we cover is the importance of defining your impact and purpose. Because if you don't know why you do the thing, you probably not gonna do the thing. You know what I mean? Like you have to know why, and your why, to your point, you love to say is like one of your favorite. We should have t-shirts that are just slogans of each other's things that we say.
I love
One
that.
of yours
I love
is
that idea.
one of yours is your why has to be big enough. And if your why isn't big enough, all the willpower in the world can't save you.
This actually comes all the way back to our charts, and it's our sun. That's where we get our vitality to execute a thing. So wherever our sun is in our chart, that's like literally where the life-giving force flows through. And then we hand that off to the various other planets to execute. So if I can hand off my big why to Mars, which is my warrior who's going to go out and do things, or I can hand off my big why to Jupiter, which is the source of knowledge and joy and like all of, or I can hand it off to Mercury, which then is going to go out and seek all the communication between all the other planets, right? And so if you don't know your big why, you won't have the vital energy to execute. And that's why we bring it all the way back to the why, is that if you don't have the natural flow of your vital force charging your actions and thoughts in the world, you are going to have to brute force, utilizing willpower, everything. And this is where we get the adrenal fatigue. This is where we get depression and the anxiety, the saying like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That doesn't mean it won't be hard to do what you love. It doesn't mean you won't have challenges. It doesn't mean you won't have difficult days. It doesn't mean that like things won't go wrong. It just means that you will have the vital force flowing through you to overcome those challenges, those difficulties, and that you will be lit up by the fact that you know that overcoming those things are bringing you closer to what you want to achieve in life or your purpose in life. And so the closer we can get and we can align to our big why, the easier everything is. And you and I were actually just recently discussing the fact that so many of our clients are so far out of alignment with their sun, in that it's so much fucking effort for them to show up every day and to keep pulling all of these weights and these obligations behind them. And we're planning to accomplish things that they probably don't even really want. And it's not that we can't get them there. It's that once they get there, they're just going to realize this is not even what I wanted to begin with. I didn't really want this business. I just wanted more money. I didn't really want this relationship with my partner. I just wanted to feel loved. It's like, if you don't have clarity around your big why, then everything you do is going to just remind you that you are not, well, why even bother?
This is so personal because you and I were just riffing on this for my own personal chart because I have an aggressive streak. I'm an Aries sun. And I have an assertiveness that in my entire life has made people around me, except for Scorpios, very uncomfortable. Scorpios and earth signs, Virgos, Taurus, you guys can handle me. Everybody else is like so offended by absolutely everything that comes out of my mouth. And it makes me like, I started to lean out of that, try to like make myself sweeter and more palatable when actually I'm really good at sales because I poke at bears. Right? Sales, if you ever want to convert a sale, find the shadow and like fucking ninja. I did sound effects just so you guys know. Zoom always cuts out my sound effects, but I did sound effects just now for you guys, my ninja sword. That's how you make sales. You're aggressive, right? Marketing is an aggressive, and I'm really good at both of those things, but I'm like pretending not to be because Dawn should just be sweet. She should just be nice. And so I'm really leaning back into what it looks like for me to live with Aries as my big why because I'm most powerful there and because it creates so much resistance and not the good kind in my field to pretend that I'm not. Right. And so when you're aligned with your sun sign, you're aligned with your big why, and you use that to propel you forward. Yes, it's still going to require evolution, which is going to take willpower and challenge and discomfort, but you're like being pulled by something bigger than you, which is actually the literal sun, right? Like you're literally being pulled by the sun. So there's less gravity, there's less weight, you're more engaged in the challenges. It is worth it for you. The sacrifices are absolutely worth it, right? And so being in alignment, I mean, if you take nothing else from this podcast, I want you to know that if you have a strategy and you're out of alignment, you're doing it all for not shit, and that's why you're getting mediocre results. If you are in alignment and then you create a plan, ha ha ha, the whole world should watch out for you. The other thing that you spoke on that I think was really important before we hopped on was the ability to overcome dreaded tasks and the importance of being able to track progress and adjust your goals as necessary. Can you give us a little bit more on both of those?
Yeah. And before we do, because we talked planets and I don't know that we'll get back there, the sun hands off to Saturn for radical plotting. And you started talking about like the bones, that we want them strong but not rigid. And then we build houses with foundations. Saturn is what builds structure. It's what builds the strategy. Saturn is what is going to help contain what we're doing, right? And so I just thought it was important for us to mention, like when we're talking about your big why and your sun, your vital energy flowing through for this particular portion of the villain's code and this particular portion of executing our big goals, we're passing off that vital energy to Saturn to create the structure from which the other planets can show up and execute. Like if you don't have a plan, if Saturn doesn't build the plan, we can't dispatch Mars to execute the plan. So
It's also discipline. Saturn is such a disciplined planet. And so,
yeah.
like, if you don't have discipline, and nobody likes that word, which I can understand, the etymology of the word is disgusting, but you need it. Like, you have to have discipline in your day to day if you're going to do if you're going to accomplish absolutely anything. And if you have resistance to discipline, it is a process of reclaiming the word discipline and rewriting what it means for you so that it's not attached to that disgusting etymology. But it is absolutely necessary. You're not going to get anywhere without Saturn's discipline.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you added that. So it is inevitable that when you create a plan and that you start chipping away at it, there are going to be certain things that you absolutely hate doing. You don't want to do them, period. They're either tedious. We get a lot of that. Like, oh, I hate admin work. It's tedious. I'm one of those people. When I have to pay sales tax every month by the 20th, like sometimes I will just decide I'd rather pay the penalty than to do it on that day. Like that is not even like, it's not even rational to be that way, but whatever, right? Like that's how I felt. One of the things that I encourage people to do, maybe this is another forcing function, I don't know, is to protect time to do those things. And basically it just allows you to align everything in you to eat the frog. There's an entire book on that, eating the frog, doing the hard thing first. But for me, I like to do it like, it doesn't have to be first. I just have to be prepared for it, right? So there might be, for example, I take Thursdays. I don't take any meetings. And anything that I have had on my to-do list that I've been kicking, if there's something on your to-do list that you've been kicking from day to day to day to day, it's probably a frog, okay? It's literally hopping from one day to the next day. It's a frog. Then put that frog in your Thursday bucket, your get you done day bucket. That's what I call my Thursday. It's my get you done day. And I just assign myself a time block to do whatever task it is. Even if it's you're in alignment with your why, there are going to be some things on there that are no thank yous, but you got to do anyways. And so we can utilize certain tools to help us accomplish those things. And protecting time blocks is a great way to do that. Co-working is a good way to do that. We literally have an hour every week where all of our group accountability people come together 10 a.m. Central Time on Mondays. We keep our cameras on unless you're eating, which I was this past, so I had my camera off for part of that meeting. And we just do the thing that we probably have been avoiding doing. And that's super valuable. I love that hour of the week. It is probably the most powerful hour of my week. And there are lots of other business models out there that you can virtually dial into rooms to like make yourself do a thing. And so like use the tools, because it's important for you to recognize that not everything on that strategy that you build is going to light you up. The other thing that we have to remind ourselves here is that the plan needs to be flexible, because as I mentioned earlier, you're going to start executing the plan. And for every question you answer, everything that you accomplish, it's going to reveal more questions you need to answer and more things you need to accomplish. And so it's a living document. A strategy, a plan to accomplish anything big is a living document. So you're going to add to it. And you might even remove things from it, because originally you thought you wanted to do it this way. You've kind of started working through the plan and you've decided you want to do it this way. So you're not married to the initial version of the plan. And even you and I came to this conclusion that we annual planned last year in December. And about 3 months into it, we didn't like that plan any longer. And we dropped the plan. We made the mistake of dropping the plan instead of coming back together and recognizing that actually we have about a 3-month roadway of where we have clarity around a thing in totality. And so we really need to be doing this same thing every 3 months, maybe not in its full depth, but at least kind of revisiting the plan, and not just like weekly going over like, but actually looking at the plan and saying what needs to change, what new questions do we have, what directions do we want to move. And by doing that, we let the process inform the process. Be flexible, recognize that you don't have to create an annual plan and then work that plan, whether it's in alignment or not, because if it's not in alignment, you're just going to not.
Yeah, and the final piece here was around the importance of tracking progress. Now, you built this into your MB.P process that you used to run last year's annual planning event for Mobile Bev Pros and for entrepreneurs. And we will be using it in a slightly different form for Brew. And one of those pieces is tracking. Like you have to be, if it's not measurable and you can't track it, then how do you know that you've accomplished a thing? And we like this because dopamine. We want to be able to say, this was on my to-do list and I to-do'd it. You know, you need to be able to say, when I hit 10K in booked business, I accomplished this goal. Now, that doesn't mean you just roll over and die happy. Now, maybe it's 15K. Now, maybe it's 20K. And we celebrate that 10K and then we say, how can I stretch again? But we can't be evolving, we can't be stretching if we aren't measuring and tracking. And so you have to have certain goalposts and you want to be sure not to move them. So though I am saying you want to evolve, you don't want to just like get to 10K and be like, found out it wasn't enough, let me get to 15K, and not celebrate your 10K mile marker. So celebrate each step of the way, but have defined goalposts that you want to reach, and then stretch yourself even further beyond that goalpost, right? So the importance of tracking is, one, for you to be acknowledging your growth along the path. Two, for you to actually have like measurable, like check it off, like it's done, like I accomplished this thing. And three, dopamine. All right, you want to take that one?
Yeah. The IMOPIT process has actually two interrelated things regarding the plan. One is to measure, and the other is to track. And they sound very much the same, but when we were talking about measuring, we're talking about where are we in relation to where we want to be. Okay. So if I have 8,000 followers on Instagram and one of my goals is to get to 10,000 followers on Instagram, I'm measuring kind of the fact that we're 2,000 people away. The tracking process is what happens thereafter, right? And so if I want to accomplish 2,000 more followers in a year, then I can break that down into X number of followers every month and X number of followers every week. And so as we're moving through the world of executing the plan to post on social media and to hopefully get more visibility and more followers, am I moving in that direction at the pace in which I need in order to accomplish this thing? And if the answer is no, now we need to look at what levers need to be pulled in order to achieve different results. And so if I'm not getting enough followers to meet my annual goal, I need to change tactics. Maybe I need to post more, maybe I need to post differently, right? And so again, the process informs the way that we proceed. And I think people oftentimes forget to do that. Not everybody. I will say the people we work with, because we work with visionaries, work with creatives, we work with artists, we work with the people that love to do the non-tracking, non-measuring, non-number things. And you can't art without math. Like the math is the universe. And so like, it's there whether you want to look at it or not. And intentionality is our whole game. That's our whole game. If we could boil down what we do for people is that we align them intentionally with where they want to go and where they feel the most aligned and alive and where they find the most joy. And so if you want to get to a place, we want to look at how well you're doing in getting there so that you can intentionally change how you show up in the world to get there more efficiently and faster. Because if this is what you want and that's what's going to make you happy and that's going to, set off all the success bells in your brain, great, we want to get you there. By measuring and tracking, we know if what we're doing is working. And if we continue to do something that isn't working, then either we keep doing it because we just have always done it that way, even though it's not working. And that's a waste of your time, energy, resources, and all the things, or we give up. And this is a little bit of an interesting example. I started strength training and Renata was like, have you looked at yourself in the mirror, your shoulders? I was like, no. And she's like, but you see the results, right? I do see results, but I'm going to keep working with you, Renata, whether or not I see results or not, because I just know it's important for me to work with you. But like people do before and after pictures when they're trying to like lose weight or strength train, because it's proof in their field that what they're doing is working. And that proof keeps them going. So if I am tracking how many Instagram followers are and I'm hitting those mile markers, I'm going to keep doing that thing because it's working. And when it stops working, I need to do a new thing. The importance through the plotting process of setting milestones and measuring how effectively you're hitting those milestones is the self-feeding mechanism. You will keep progressing when you have proof that the work pays off. And so we want to make sure that we're building in reflection points throughout the plotting process so that you have what you need in order to keep doing the things that are getting you closer. Because if we don't see results, and sometimes the results are hidden, right? Sometimes you're just not going to see them while you're in it. To your point, you're like, if you just blow by a milestone of 10,000, because now your new goal is 15,000, then at any point you might get really frustrated. And so anyone who's ever been like, man, I'm not where I want to be in life, without recognizing like where you were, like, and you and I sometimes do this, we're like, man, we're not where we want to be in life. But then we look back and we're like, but I sure ain't there anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's important to reflect on those things so that you have the energy to keep going.
Absolutely. This has been another awesome episode. Thank you so much, Sarah, for hanging out with me. You guys, thank you for listening. Again, if you want more of this, there are 7 other pillars on the Crowns and Chaos podcast. You can go subscribe over there, check out those podcasts. They are entirely different than the ones you guys are getting over here at MB.P. And if you are in the Villain Era Challenge, we want to hear all about what this brought up for you. What resistance do you have to strategy? What are you excited about? Drop it into the group Telegram and let us know what your thoughts are. And we will talk to you guys all on the next one.
And that wraps up today's episode. I hope it was valuable. I would love to hear from you what you thought. You can drop me a line at hello@mobilebevpros.com or find me on Instagram at mobilebevpros. If you're looking for more valuable mobile bar related content, we have a website full of it. You can find us at www.mobilebevpros.com. And I'd love to see you in our Facebook community, also by the name of, you guessed it, Mobile Bev Pros. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, cheers.